Well, Paul Perot, once again, you delivered at the upper end, as you said you would. I guess your immunoglobulin sales are the standout, dealing with immunodeficiency.
They are, Tiki. Thank you. It's been another great year by the employees here at CSL to deliver and for the patients that we serve, and it's really driven by the demand with the immunoglobulins, which was a big contributor. So really treating those patients with the primary immune deficiencies and really the secondary immunodeficiencies with all the use of these new cancer immunotherapies that depress the immune system. So boosting it back up is quite helpful for these patients and preventing infection. So it's in high demand, and it's great that it's part of our underlying growth of the business that then fuels our ability to invest into the rest of the business.
Right. Now, is this literally the number of people who are growing who require these sorts of products, or is it the types of products that you're offering?
No, it's really driven by demand, Tiki. So it's the awareness and diagnosis of the disease. So with primary immune deficiency, we still have new patients every day being diagnosed, because it's not just like the boy in the bubble, which would be the most severe example of primary immune deficiency, but it's about people that have low functioning immune systems as well, that have been sick most of their lives with different infections that have never really gotten the underlying treatment. It's also that expansion, as I said, into the secondary immunodeficiency, where these new cancer immunotherapy agents really depress the immune system in order to get the targets for the chemotherapy agents available without the immune system responding. Yeah. But then, of course, when you depress the immune system, you're more prone to infection, so you have to supplement back to build up the immunities. And then it's the expansion into the neurological area. We had new indications that have been released for chronic neurology diseases, where the nerve endings or the nerve coverings, the myelin covering of the nerves, actually start to degrade, and this is a chronic disease that's treated with immunoglobulins as well. So it's new diagnosis, it's awareness, it's also new indications that we're seeing across the globe that really are driving the demand for the products.
Key to this also is your plasma, your collection centres. You're opening up even more, even faster. Now, how is the cost per litre, though, going? I understand that a relatively strong economy makes that cost difficult to drive down.
Well, that's true, because a lot of the cost in plasma collection goes to the wonderful and regular donors that we have that are showing up every day to provide this rare raw material in plasma. And that does put pressure on. But, my job and the job of the organization is to continue to look at efficiencies. And we are the most efficient collector in the world. So we do have efficiencies gains over our competitors, because we've been working at this for a decade and a half to press and pull 1,000 different levers that are necessary to be the most efficient collector in the business. So one, you have to keep up, because this is a very difficult raw material to collect. Secondly, it's a long lead time. So when you collect a liter of plasma, it takes about 210 days for processing before you actually see product out the door. So if you're not collecting well ahead of demand, then you're going to be short when it comes time to manufacture. So that's really what we're trying to do, and be efficient at the same time to keep cost in line.
Can I move to the China market and albumin? You've seen good growth there, but you're changing to a new method of direct distribution, and you've got a license from the Chinese to do this. How important is that to the business in China? Are you confident about growth there?
Look, I am, and we've been selling in China now for over 20 years, so it's not our first rodeo when it comes to really driving the business there. But again, if we take it back to the plasma collection, the hardest thing in China is the hardest thing we do. It's collect plasma. So the local producers cannot supply the whole market with the demand that's in China, and we are the largest supplier of albumin in China today. And So what we're doing with direct distribution is, up until this point, without that license from the government, we relied on third-party distributors to sell and market the product that we import. Now, it's one product in 1,000 out of their product catalog, and so we don't get our due for this precious product that we sell. And so this allows us direct access to the customers, allows our people, our medical folks, as well as our sales and marketing folks, to go in and really differentiate our brand in China and drive that access. And I think it's important for us to own our supply chain in China through to the end customer, because at the end of the day, we're here to serve the patients, and we want to have that ability to drive that.
Yeah, well, terrific that you're being able to do that. What was really interesting on the call, the analyst call, I thought, was the impact of foreign exchange. I mean, obviously, you're a company that is reporting in US dollars, but when it comes to the yuan, the current trade dispute, possible currency wars, that will impact your business.
It will, to a certain extent. I mean, certainly China, we do have significant sales there, and so that translation of the yuan to the dollar could have an impact depending on what happens. We all know that this has been bouncing around every single day. On the other side, because we're changing a number of our functional currencies to the US dollar, it eliminates some of the other risk that we had in the Forex that showed up in the numbers this year. So we had guided to about 60 million in terms of Forex impact. We ended up at close to 100, which is hard to predict, as you know, in currency, but that eliminates some of that risk, although we might have a little bit more risk in China.
Okay.
But again, we try to balance all of these.
Right. Now, I want to move to flu because, of course, here in Australia we've had a horrendous flu season with fatalities. You've taken Seqirus now from Novartis. You've had this huge strategic turnaround. You're now in the black. Could you grow this business to be much, much bigger in proportion of the entire group than it is now?
Well, it's going to be hard to grow the business to a bigger proportion of the group because the group is also growing at a fast rate.
Right.
Right. So as a percentage, it's going to be hard to grow. But overall, I do believe we still have room for growth as we transition the product portfolio and especially move more to cell culture manufacturing. And I think this is really the opportunity for us. This is a unique technology. We're the only scaled player with cell-based flu technology. And so I think that offers us some advantages, as well as our FluAd, which is our adjuvanted flu for the elderly, which of course are at high risk for influenza and disease.
And what's the advantage of cell-based over egg?
Well, you don't have to rely so much on chickens, which is, you know, to get those eggs. During the flu season, we will process up to 800,000 eggs per day. And the supply chain there is quite complex. The issue is that if you need surge capacity, that is, so for instance, in Australia it's a very tough season this year, and people are dying, and it's not a, you know, the flu is a serious disease, and we have to think long and hard about how we encourage people to look at vaccinations. But having said that, if you need surge capacity, that is, you need additional doses of vaccine after you've already produced for the season, it's very hard to order more eggs and have them available to actually make the vaccine. With cells, you're able to replicate those cells in a way that is much faster to actually have the starting cell to grow the strains in. So the ability to ramp up in a crisis mode is better with the cell than it is with the eggs, just because of the lead time and the logistics. And so that's where I think, you know, many countries are looking for cell-based technologies because the supply chain on the eggs is a difficult one to deal with, especially with the massive numbers, the hundreds of millions of doses we're talking about in the industry.
And are you the market leader in cell-based technology?
We are.
Yeah. So when it comes to, dare I mention, never mind the flu, an actual pandemic, CSL is also doing deals at a government level in terms of reserves, aren't you? Does that bring in revenue? Presumably it does.
Well, it does in some respects. So we have some reservation fees that the government's utilized to make sure that they kind of rock up in the rank to get access to pandemic strains. We do some stockpile ordering for antigen. The problem is you're not sure exactly which antigen will be circulating in terms of the virus when a pandemic hits, or when will the pandemic hit. So, look, I think all governments are aware. They're all working on ways to mitigate if a pandemic happens. We don't know when that will happen, but we know it probably will at some point. We've seen this pattern through the decades where, you know, one year is kind of a mild season, the next is more, and then in today's environment with the global travel and the access of people across countries and borders, the likelihood of a pandemic, if you talk to the experts, you know, is certainly there. We just don't know when.
Yes, and
so we have to be prepared.
Indeed, including you've got a new chief to take over from Gordon Eller, who transformed Securus.
Yes, yes. So we do have a new chief there in Securus, and you know, Gordon is, as was announced, is retiring, and spoke to him yesterday. He's doing great. And I'll be meeting with Anjana in 2 weeks. Certainly we've been on the phone talking, but we'll be together in a couple of weeks.
Okay, last couple of questions. One is about your announcement that you are going to remain in Australia. Your global headquarters is going to remain in Australia. You've got a huge project ahead of you over the next few years. Why did you decide to stay in Australia?
So it really has to do with our ability to manage the organization here in Australia, and to really make sure that we're in the hub of the biomedical environment and infrastructure and ecosystem in Australia. We are the largest private investor in R&D in Australia. You know, when we take a look at the science here in Australia, we have to remove ourselves from our current headquarters for a number of reasons. One, we looked at staying where we are here in Parkville on Poplar Road, but that closeness to our researchers at Bio21, as well as the university, and the whole ecosystem around that medical community and the WEHI is extremely important to the future of CSL, because this is our hub for global research. We have a hub and spoke model on research, and Melbourne is the hub. Bio21 has been the mainstay, and we have to bring our organization together, and we would have had to refit the current site in terms of new manufacturing facilities for our recombinant proteins at the research stage, and to refurbish the current site and to really try to build was quite costly. And this bespoke building will really not only help us to be organized with all of our employees that are in the infrastructure of corporate and R&D and our commercial colleagues, yes, but it also brings the science together, and we can walk across the street to Bio21 and have that connection, as well as with our other research partners. So right, it was just the obvious helpful place for us to be. And there's great science here in Australia. This is our heritage, and this is where we continue to drive the research from.
Right, so then the obvious question is, as investors who continue enjoy the growth at CSL, your outlook, your profits going to go up 10% in fiscal 2020. How should investors see the stock? Very much a growth stock, because your dividends were up, but they're still low compared to, you know, many other stocks around.
Yeah, look, I think they should look at it as a growth stock, because it is a growth story. We're innovating. Innovation is the key to our success in this industry. And when you see us investing in innovation, you see us investing in research, you see us investing in capacity like the plasma centers, it's being driven by demand. I don't build these big plants and add new collection centers on the hope of these things. We see this underlying demand in the treatment of the diseases, and we see it as growth for the future. So the base business is growing. I think investors should take a look at the core of the business in terms of what we're investing in terms of infrastructure, in terms of people, employees up 13%. You know, the people are really what bring us all together and deliver on these things. So when you see us increasing employment, building infrastructure, research and innovation, and continued increase in research and development, it tells, I think, the very clear story that CSL is still at a very exciting time in our history and in our future.
Paul Perreault, another record high on the market to endorse that. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiki.